Okay, we're going to hop around a couple different topics here in this video. The first one connects up with pages 10, 11, and if you need additional space, there's an entirely blank page on the 12th. And this has to do with the homework question regarding how we've previously discussed the role of public education in the making of national citizens. Why do historians cite the rise of mass socialist political parties across Europe as a factor in government's initiative to introduce public education for both girls and boys? Maybe an easier way to have phrased this question is, why do they cite the rise of mass socialist political parties across Europe as a factor for the onset of the welfare state? The context to consider off of the background reading of pages 10 and 11 is the fact that now the population of the underclass in the cities is becoming so great, so large, and they're packed together in these concentrated urban areas that really their demands for a better standard of living and greater equality of opportunity really become irrefutable. If the early industrial societies had tried to maintain laissez-faire free market capitalism, this would have just been an explosion of social class warfare and violence. So what the middle and upper class are going to start to do is they're going to start to roll out the welfare state policies, the socialist welfare policies. And you've got a bunch of different ones that are listed in the background reading on the 10th and the 11th. But certainly one of the most significant, and some of those are like accident insurance and health care and disability insurance, et cetera, welfare policies. Social safety net policies. But when you look at some of the impetus behind this, if you look at this paragraph in particular, as it pertains to public education, here you really see kind of the tension that exists in the latter half of the 19th century. This paragraph right here is the third paragraph on page 10, and it reads, "The International Workingmen's Association was founded in 1864 under the leadership of Karl Marx. It forged different working class unions and political parties from around Europe into an international collective to prepare for a revolutionary takeover of European societies by the proletariat." So Karl Marx, he's actively organizing these socialist parties, these labor unions, etc. Remember, Marxism is trying to organize the revolutionary overthrow of the middle and upper classes. Marxism called ultimately for the abolishment of national barriers and identity. Instead, it promotes class identity, social class identity above all others, summarized in the famous Marxist slogan, "Workers of the world unite." Marxists believe that humans, the vast majority, of course, who belong to the lower class, you're talking about the 90%, true identity lay not in the territorial nation state, not in nationalism, but amongst their fellow workers, together with whom they would revolutionize human society and, according to Marxist communism, bring about justice, peace, and liberty of communism. This development, of course, alarmed the more traditional power structure of the liberals and conservatives. Once Marx and these socialist political parties and labor unions start to actively organize for the revolutionary overthrow of the middle and upper classes, that's when the social welfare policies start getting rolled out across Europe. Those liberal and conservative political parties and segments of these societies across Europe, they obviously don't want a revolutionary overthrow and the establishment of a dictatorship of a proletariat across Europe, or obviously particularly in their society. So what they're going to do is they're going to roll out all sorts of social welfare programs to say, hey, you don't need to, create a violent revolution to overthrow us. We're looking out for you. Look, we're going to, have healthcare insurance and unemployment and, child labor laws and public education as a pathway to potential upward social mobility, et cetera. And what this does is it placates, which means satisfies the demands of the underclass, and kind of tamps down that revolutionary fervor and say, oh, we don't need to engage in a violent overthrow of the society. The society is going to look out for us in the context of a welfare state. And that's what a welfare state does. It maintains social safety net programs to guarantee the economic and social stability of its citizens, of its population. What's interesting about public education here in this regard is, of course, in public education, this is going to satisfy some demands of the underclass in terms of having a potential avenue of upward social mobility. But also, of course, in the public educational setting, there's going to be some nationalistic education going on in terms of where is the identity of the underclass going to reside. The liberals and conservatives want the identity of the underclass to reside in the nation. And, every morning, hand over heart, Pledge of Allegiance, the flag on the wall, the picture of the monarch, et cetera, et cetera. Now, like we just read about, the Marxist outlook is nationalism is a completely contrived, fake, fraudulent identity that divides the underclass. What Marx is talking about is a global identity of the underclass versus the middle class in particular, but the upper class as well, ultimately. And it says, workers of the world unite. We have more in common across our common social class than we do with the middle and the upper classes in our own society, and they deserve to be overthrown because they've been dominating and exploiting us and taking advantage of us and getting rich off of their exploitation of us for time immemorial. So the Marxists are trying to formulate this social class identity. Their argument is that proper identity is based in social class above all others. The liberals and conservatives are going to set up public education because on one hand, it placates, satisfies the demands of the underclass and makes them, potentially less revolutionary because they've got a potential avenue of upward social mobility, but also they're going to be promoting nationalistic identity. There's a battle on here in the latter half of the 19th century for where identity is going to reside. Nationalism is going to be the winner by and large, for sure. The Internationale, which is the the anthem of international communism, reads as such with this in mind. Here are some of the lyrics. It says, the Internationale, the international communist movement, unites the world in song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. He's talking about internationalism. Marx and the Marxist communists, they're talking about internationalism. They believe that nationalism is a fake identity that divides the underclass and pits them against each other, especially in foreign wars, where the underclass is doing most of the fighting and killing and dying in those wars at the behest and at the orders of the middle and the upper class. And they're saying, we've got more in common with each other. All these lines on the map and all these divisions between members of the underclass are completely fake and fraudulent. The real basis of human identity is social class identity. Us, the 95% versus them, the 10%. That's the proper basis of human identity. We've got a lot more in common with each other because we've been downtrodden and exploited and taken advantage of by the middle and upper classes in our own societies. We've got a lot more in common with each other than we do with the middle and the upper classes in our own society. So the Internationale goes on to say, in our world poisoned by exploitation, they're obviously referring to the exploits of the middle and upper class, taking advantage of the underclass. Those who've taken, now they must give. Like they're going to, violently revolutionize and overthrow the middle and the upper classes in these societies and end the vanity of nations. Again, from the Marxist perspective, nationalism is a completely fake, fraudulent identity. We've but one earth on which to live. This is this notion of it's going to be all of humanity living harmoniously once we destroy the exploitive middle and upper classes and create a dictatorship of the proletariat, which is a classless society where everybody increasingly looks out for each other. Again, in the public education setting, they're definitely promoting nationalism. The liberals and conservatives are very alarmed, as the reading talked about, regarding the organization of groups to violently revolutionize the society. So, public education kind of serves two purposes for the middle and the upper class. On one hand, they kind of tamp down and reduce revolutionary fervor of the underclass because the underclass feels like the next generation potentially has an avenue to upward social mobility. And obviously, public education is a socialist welfare program. That's not in keeping with laissez-faire capitalism. But at the exact same time, they can promote nationalistic identity through parts of the curriculum in the public educational setting. Okay, with that, let's turn our attention next. Again, we're going to hop around a few topics here. let's turn our attention next to page 13 and some topics around the new woman and gender ideals at the turn of the century here. We had a couple questions. The first one, in terms of voting rights, female suffrage, the suffragette movement. That means obviously voting rights. Suffrage is a voting rights movement for women. So why did industrialization and greater educational opportunities for women lead to the female suffrage movement? Well, what you have here is, as a result of industrialization, there's more and more women in the workforce than ever before. And the reading talked about how there's more and more jobs. There's entire fields that are dominated by women, such as nursing and education and secretarial work. But just generally, women are living a more public life in the workforce. More and more women are going into the workforce. Well, similarly, because of public education from a very young age and just increasing educational opportunities in general, not just early years education, but also high school and even some college opportunities for some women, women are living more and more of a public existence, whether it be in the workforce, in the classroom, from a very young age in public school, from 6 years old on. Women are living a more and more public life. They're spending more and more and more of their lives in the public sphere than ever before in all of human history, certainly in all of the history of Western civilization. So voting rights would be like the next logical step. Like, these women are living their lives in the public sphere educationally. These women are living their lives in the public sphere in terms of participation in the workforce like never before. So why not have full public participation in the political arena as well? And you can think about it this way as well. Like, you maybe go to elementary school with your male counterparts from 6 years old on, and for like 8 years potentially you've run laps intellectually around some of your male counterparts. Okay. But when it comes to the time you're all 18, like that, and some of those men who you've just been running complete laps around educationally and intellectually, they can vote and you can't. So that disconnect between women playing and living an ever more public life and not having the right to vote, it becomes an increasingly glaring one, an obvious one, and therefore women demanding ever more so into the 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century, for the right to vote. And then you've got the concept of the new woman, and you've probably, from the homework, got a number of those pieces down as well. But the new woman, she lives a public life. She's not living primarily in the domestic sphere, certainly not exclusively in the domestic sphere. The new woman has an education. She has a job. She's independent because she has her own credentials educationally. She has her own salary financially in the workforce. And she lives a public life. She's independent. She has a high level of individuality where she's making her own choices, determining her own course, certainly not strictly prescribed in the domestic sphere. So here's kind of the contrast. This would be kind of the fashion sense of the Victorian ideal from the previous gender ideal of the 19th century. And then here you've got the new woman in the 20th century. And you can see the shifting ideals from Victorian to new woman here, 19th to 20th century. Here, the Victorian ideal, it's very limited. It's very restricted. You're not going to go out and work a job or, have a 6-8 hour school day or a shift in the workforce in a corset and a hoop skirt. That's just not going to happen. And additionally, you'd need somebody to help you around. You'd be really dependent. You wouldn't be able to physically move around in public in this type of fashion ideal. Here, the outfits of the new woman is all about kind of freedom of movement, a lot of different possibilities about what you could do. Certainly, you can go out in the public sphere and operate in the public sphere. You can go to class, you can go to work, you can go out on the town socially, independently, freely, etc. So these are some of the major hallmarks of the new woman. The very last topic for our consideration, we're just going to kind of set this up, and then I'm going to set you on your way to do this work in class here. But if you flip ahead to page 21, there's some considerations of the psychologist Sigmund Freud. And Sigmund Freud is a hugely impactful thinker in the field of psychology in the late 19th, early 20th century. And the field of psychology is the study of human behavior. Why do human beings act the way they act? And Freudian psychology will become tremendously influential in the first half of the 20th century. His work starts in the late 19th and goes into the 20th century. What I'm going to have you do on page 21, I'm going to have you read some of the background here, because what Freud represents are some challenges to modern belief and modern thought. And up until this point, the challenges to modern belief and modern thought that we've considered have all come from a traditional religious perspective. But what you start to see in the late 19th century, from a totally secular vantage point, is like in the field of Freudian psychology, in the field of the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, which is for the homework next time, in the new physics of Albert Einstein and Max Planck, which is also for the homework next time, you're going to see challenges to modern belief and modern thought. You're going to see challenges to this Enlightenment, secular, humanistic outlook, but it's not coming from a traditional religious perspective. Freud, Nietzsche, Einstein, Planck, their theories all represent major questions to modern and challenges to modern belief, but they're all coming from a completely secular vantage point. What I'm asking you to do here on the 21st is go for some underlining and jot down some talking points. The first paragraph has to do with just kind of a brief overview and summary of major aspects of modern Enlightenment, secular, humanistic outlook and belief. And then there's obviously a brief overview of major hallmarks of Freudian psychology. What are some of the major differences? What are the major contrasts? What specific challenges and questions do those contrasts represent to modern secular humanistic belief? We're going to look at a series of thinkers here, starting with Freud, then going to Nietzsche through the homework, apply that on over to the study guide, the new physics of Planck and Einstein, that background reading for the homework, apply that on over to the study guide. But we're going to look at a series of thinkers, starting with Sigmund Freud, that their theories and their conclusions in various fields, again, psychology, philosophy, physics, etc. But all of their theories and all of their conclusions are going to represent some major challenges and raise some major issues and major questions for modern belief and modern thought. Again, the beliefs that stemmed from the 18th century Enlightenment and secular humanistic thinking and faith generally. So go for that on page 21, please. Thank you so much.